The next bit of content that we're going to react to is going to be a Spectrum post. This one's been up for a few days already. This post is by Astrum Vates, or Vatus or whatever, from Nova Intergalactic. And it's titled, "What Happened to the Game We Backed?" I don't know, Astrum. Why don't you tell us? Tell us what happened to the game we backed. I'd like to get a few things off my chest that have been slowly eating away at me in the back of my mind. Sounds like a very painful thing. Something on your chest that's been eaten away at your back of your mind. Now let's talk about the direction of Star Citizen, because it's starting to feel like we're being funneled into an entirely different game than what we were originally promised. If you've been paying attention, it's pretty clear that CIG is focusing primarily on FPS combat because it's the easiest system to develop, while simultaneously dumbing down spaceflight with master modes and ignoring the core mechanics that made so many of us pledge in the first place. This isn't just an isolated shift, it's a full-blown change in development priorities that threaten to turn Star Citizen into Call of Duty in space rather than the groundbreaking space sim we all signed up for, and it's time we started calling it out. This has been fucking said for years. I don't know what this guy's fucking on about. Air Bears have been complaining about this for years. Alright, FPS combat, the low-hanging fruit. If there's one thing CIG has been consistently working on and releasing, it's FPS combat content. Siege of Orison, Jumptown, Ninetales Lockdown, Star Marine reworks, Underground Bunkers, the upcoming Theaters of War, if it ever sees the light of day, all of these revolve around gunplay. That wouldn't be a problem if the rest of the game was receiving the same level of attention, but let's be real, it's not. FPS mechanics are relatively straightforward to develop, especially compared to the incredibly complex systems needed for things like trade, salvage, and dynamic economies. It's easy to create new bunkers, throw in some AI enemies, and tell players to shoot their way through for quick action, but here's the issue, that's not what most of us backed Star Citizen for. We backed it for a deep, immersive space sim where we could build careers as miners, haulers, salvagers, repair techs, and traders. We were promised a game where space combat would be tactical, skill-based, and immersive. Yet instead of refining those mechanics, CIG is constantly throwing US content at us, seemingly because it's the easiest way to keep people engaged. And let's not ignore the elephant in the room. Star Citizen's FPS gameplay isn't even that good. Desync issues, clunky animations, poor AI, and inconsistent gunplay all plague the experience, yet despite FPS still feels feeling subpar, it keeps getting attention while other systems are left to rot. Master modes, the death of flight depth. If FPS combat is thriving, the same can't be said for space flight. CIG's controversial new master mode system is a direct nerf to the complexity and skill ceiling that once made Star Citizen's flight model stand out. For those unfamiliar, master modes essentially splits flight into two modes. Nav mode, you can travel quickly, but weapons are disabled. Combat mode, you can fight, but you're limited to slow speeds. The idea is to force closer engagements and reduce the jousting problem that dogfighting has faced for years, but in practice, it dumbs down space flight and removes the tactical decision-making that made high-speed combat exciting. Instead of improving the existing system, they're opting for an arbitrary restriction that makes fights more predictable, repetitive, and less engaging. And let's not pretend this is about balance or better gameplay. It's clear that master modes exist to make FPS transition smoother, to ensure that ships aren't zipping around too fast for ground combat and boarding actions. It's yet another example of space flight being sacrificed in favor of the FPS-centric vision that CIG seems obsessed with. This raises an even bigger question. Why is spaceflight, one of the core pillars of the game, being diluted to accommodate a secondary gameplay loop? Why are dogfighting and high-speed engagements being nerfed so that ground troops have an easier time? Where are the core gameplay loops? Now let's talk about the real problems. CIG is neglecting the gameplay loops that were supposed to define Star Citizen. Mining was a promising start, but it's barely evolved in years. There's still no deeper progression system, no significant mining economy, and Orion mining is nowhere in sight. This person's fucking eyes must be painted on. Mining was getting so much attention. It's one of the most developed gameplay systems in the fucking game at the moment. What the fuck are they on about? Freight and cargo hauling are still bare bones, with an extremely basic and often broken economy. Hauling is pointless because there's no risk versus reward system, and persistent cargo is still half-baked. This person doesn't play the game. Fucking the cargo hauling missions are all reward, no risk. Salvage finally got its first iteration, but it's still a shallow gameplay loop with little real depth. Where's the ability to truly break down ships? Where's the meaningful progression? What do you mean truly break down ships? What the fuck are they on about? Like right now we get 2 components, construction materials and recycled material composite. Like if you want to break down the ship further, if you're able to go aboard the ship and the components are physicalized, you can pull the guns off, you can pull the ship components out before you scrape the ship and, you know, munch it for construction materials. Repair and refueling were supposed to be major mechanics, yet they're barely functional. The Starfarer can technically refuel, but it's so clunky and impractical that no one does it. Repair is essentially non-existent. Refueling is actually broken at the moment. COG's been working on a fix for it. I believe they've fixed it for the next patch. And repairing at the moment is just a reverse of salvaging, which you just, instead of sucking up grey goo, you're shooting grey goo. That's the extent of repair. I want it to be more in depth as well, but, you know, planned for but not yet implemented. Base building, a huge promised feature. It's still just a vague idea floating around in the distant future, despite being something that could fundamentally change the game. Instead of focusing on these deep gameplay systems, the things that make a living, breathing universe, we keep getting more FPS events, more bunkers, more combat mechanics. Why? Because they're easy. They provide instant gratification, whereas the things like functioning trade system or a dynamic economy require actual long-term development. Like, here's a shocking thing that I don't know if this person realizes, but you can do 2 things at once, right? Like, you can have a team. This is the benefit of having a large presence, you know, a large company, is that you can have a team working on the short gameplay loops to, you know, keep people engaged with the product whilst you're developing the long-term stuff. Because there is a group that is working on base building right now. Yes, they are. They're working on it. It's just going to be introduced so far away that they need other things for us to do. They can afford to have some of the developers not working on base building. This is like the mentality where it's like, oh, we don't need as many bloody artists, you know, 3D modelers or anything like that. Bloody send them over to do programming. We need server meshing ASAP, more network engineers. All right, all you 3D modelers, guess what? You're now network engineers. Maybe that's why server meshing took so long. CIG, instead of hiring network engineers, just retrained all the 3D modelers to be network engineers. Maybe. Does CIG even believe in its own vision anymore? The frustrating part is that CIG used to talk about Star Citizen as a groundbreaking space sim, something that would push boundaries and redefine the genre. Now, it feels like they're making just another FPS with spaceships as background scenery. They're catering to the lowest common denominator, instant action FPS fans, while ignoring the simulation depth that made Star Citizen special. It's hard to shake the feeling that they're prioritizing short-term engagement metrics over building the deeper, multifaceted experience they originally sold us on. And let's be real, this shift conveniently aligns with Squadron 42, which is primarily a FPS-heavy, story-driven game. It's hard not to feel like Star Citizen itself is being used as a testbed for Squadron's mechanics, with persistent universe players being left with whatever scraps are convenient to develop. When was the last time you heard anyone at CIG refer to Star Citizen as the best damn space sim ever? Like, CIG's already told us half this stuff. Like, Squadron 42 is their priority, and they're bringing stuff in from Squadron 42 to the persistent universe. And it's kind of hard to avoid the FPS element of this game, because you're playing as a character in the Star Citizen universe when you're in Squadron 42, from their perspective, seeing the world through their eyes, right? Well, Danger Ho, regardless of its state, we'll find out next year, apparently. They're aiming for a 2026 release. What part of 2026? No fucking idea. Alright, there's a bit more. Holy shit, this is fucking long. Credit to @ColdZephyr for pointing out the star map below. Originally, we were promised over 100 star systems to explore, with a vast interconnected universe full of opportunity for trade, industry, piracy, and deep space adventures. Now, CIG has quietly slashed that down to barely a handful of systems with no real plan to deliver the rest. Pyro, a single additional system, has been implemented, yet somehow we're supposed to believe they'll ever deliver dozens more? At this rate, we'll be lucky to see 5 systems in the next decade. Instead of the expansive universe we were sold on, we're stuck in Stanton running repetitive loops, while CIG focuses on flashy, short-term FPS content. It's yet another sign that the grand vision of Star Citizen is being downsized, delayed, or outright abandoned in favor of whatever makes the most money right now. You know, if CIG was really that focused on the FPS side of things, they wouldn't be selling fucking spaceships anymore, right? They'll just sell all these FPS packages and just be like, buy the FPS package. Like, spaceships are still the central component of Star Citizen because you need them to get everywhere. Where the OP just didn't watch the 1.0 presentation, yeah, they didn't. Where do we go from here? I feel it's time for the community to push back. If we don't voice our concerns now, CIG will keep shifting towards an FPS-centric, watered-down version of what was supposed to be the ultimate space sim, not just an FPS shooter in space. We need to demand a commitment to deep, engaging space flight mechanics, not dumbed-down master modes. Serious progress on the non-combat professions that were supposed to be the backbone of the economy, a functioning trade and cargo system that makes hauling and industry actually matter, salvage, repair, and refueling that are more than just half-baked gimmicks, a return to the original vision of Star Citizen as an immersive universe, not just an FPS with ships. CIG needs to remember why people backed this project. It wasn't for another shooter. It wasn't for arbitrary nerfs to spaceflight. It was for a vast, ambitious space sim that lets players carve their own path. I won't even begin to list all the ships people paid for years ago that are still nowhere to be seen, not even a whisper of an update. The ships we funded, an afterthought. 10/14 of my ships are still nothing more than JPEGs. So I'll ask again, is CIG still making that game, or have they already moved on? Have all of us old-time backers been left as an afterthought now that CIG has our money? TLDR, where is the game we all backed, or is this just another generic FPS shooter with a space-themed backdrop? I feel like those are appropriate. There should also be a snowflake one. All the game has shifted massively though, I can't disagree with the OP. I'm always going to ask this question because I never understand when people sit there and say, I want an immersive universe. Because I can't understand how first person view is not seen as immersive, right? Can't see that. With what they're talking about here, let's have a look at the core gameplay loops. I already said this. Mining is the most developed gameplay loop in Star Citizen. You can mine gems by hand, you can mine gems with 2 different vehicles. You can then mine asteroids with 1 of 2 different ships, one being a solo, one being multi-crew. You can then attach different components for mining, consumables. You can attach them directly to the rocks, or you can attach them to your mining heads. You have different mining heads that you can use. You can go around pinging for different rocks and mine different rocks and get different ore. You can then take that ore to a refinery station and refine that ore for a higher grade of commodity. You can then load that commodity onto one of your cargo hauling ships and then sell it. There are more variants of fighters for sale than industry ships. But in terms of mining gameplay, mining gameplay has received so much more attention. I don't understand how they're saying that. There's still no deeper progression system. What does that even mean in terms of mining? You're microwaving a rock. You're then sucking it up, you're taking it somewhere to turn it into something else, and then you can either sell it. And in the future, when base building is in, it'll be one of the components that you contribute to building something. No significant mining economy. What does that even mean? Are you expecting mining commodities to be on some sort of trade house? Planned for, but not yet implemented. Yeah, Zen, I spent the first 2 hours of this stream reacting to that one. And the Orion mining is nowhere in sight. Yes, that's because there's nothing of that scale in terms of mining that you can do, because the Orion mining ship is a capital class ship. Trade and cargo hauling are still bare bones. Cargo hauling is exactly where it needs to be. Cargo hauling, grab boxes, load onto ship, move ship from A to B, unload boxes. That's cargo hauling. That's literally it. Doesn't need to be any more than that. Trade, on the other hand, needs to be a lot more in depth than what we've got right now. Planned for, but not yet implemented. That's the reality. Yeah, that's right, Datsun. It is as deep as number go up. Thing though is that those credits drive everything. Here's a challenge that you guys can do, and I'm pretty sure there's other content creators that have done this in the past. But instead of just doing whatever's the most efficient thing to make credits to then buy a ship, create a list of commodities that you believe would be used to create X ship, and then go out and mine and refine those, and then all the commodities that you get from that, sell them off, and then see if you can buy the ship with it. I personally, if I was doing that thing, I would do exactly that, except I would make the commodities be equal to what that ship would be worth in credits. Because realistically, the industry loops, right, are just a different form of crafting. It's a different frame of thinking when you do game design, when you think about these sorts of things. If you're able to collect a resource convert it into a currency, and then use that currency to purchase the item. Did you craft that item going through those steps or not? In a roundabout way, you could say that you crafted that item, and that converting the commodities that you collected into a currency is just part of the step of crafting that ship that you want. The vendor that you purchase the ship at is just the additional step that you need to take, where you've converted the currency into that ship, and it's instant creation of that ship, right? It's a different mindset to think about how crafting can work in a video game. Because when you take crafting, all it is a bunch of components that you take, so a bunch of commodities, or another way of thinking about them is different currencies. Okay, you've got your iron currency, you've got your copper currency, you've got your silicon currency, and you combine them all together into one currency that equals a ship. A different way of thinking about crafting. So from a specific point of view, you could say that you're crafting ships. The reach, don't get me wrong, I understand that. But there's a frame of mindset that people can adopt to try and say, hey, there is actually a bit more depth here. And when people say, like, you know, the game isn't that deep, it's like, well, it's more about steps to complexity, or steps between where you start and where you get to, that creates depth, and what you do along the way as well. Right now, the depth is, you know, make credits turn into something else. Like, well, that is true. However, using a different frame of mind, you can achieve realizing the actual depth of the game. Salvage finally got its first iteration. Actually, no, it's on its second one. The first iteration was just RMC. You know, where's the ability to truly break down ships? What does that even mean? Well, you want to cut up the ship? You can do that by fracturing it, just like you do in mining gameplay. You know, what does this even mean? Where's the meaningful progression? What does that mean? Like, what are you on about meaningful progression? This person has used throughout this Spectrum post a series of buzzwords where they're like, I want an immersive game, I want meaningful progression. What the fuck does that all even mean? I want to have impact on the verse. It's like, okay, well, these missions here, you know, like, let's look at Xenothreat. Xenothreat has invaded Stanton, and you're going to go push them back. Oh no, I don't mean that type of impact. That involves combat. I don't want to do combat. Okay, well, let's include you guys into this, you know, event where you've got to deliver the cargo for them. No combat involved in that. You might get attacked, but if you got friends that can fight off, you know, the attackers, all you got to worry about is moving the cargo. Oh no, I don't want to do that because that involves combat. Even though I'm doing nothing that's involved, like my gameplay loop, my section of it is not combat. I don't want to do that because there's combat around it. Like, that's dumb. A dumb way of thinking. Like, meaningful progression towards what? What is there to progress to? Like, does this person not find the rewards for Save Stanton, for Fight for Pyro meaningful? Account-bound items that you can't get any other way? Did you not progress? You went from having nothing to having something? Like, this person trying to articulate themselves is doing it really poorly, which is why I always say, you know, what do they mean by immersive? You know, what to them is immersive? And when they start talking about just all the other gameplay loops that are outside of combat, it just, my mind starts, you know, ticking over and going, yeah, this is just another anti-PvP post. They don't want combat in the game. They don't want combat from other players in the game. All right, I missed Jag's bloody post, which I think is relevant to the point that I'm bringing up now. Jag says, I don't have an issue with FPS per se. I think the problem is that we don't matter a great deal. Not to the verse, but to each other. The issue is lack of economy and lack of attachment of professions to that economy, and the lack of interdependency for professions in that economy. Example, Eve as a great example. I kind of understand what you mean by that, from the perspective that the whole, like, let's take mining loop. And even then, like, it takes effort to make a lot of this work. But you can do a lot of the gameplay loops by yourself in this game, right? You can do solo piracy, but it's easier in a team. You can achieve more with a team. Do the credits matter? Not really. At the end of the day, the credits never will matter, because in the alpha environment that we're in, everything can be wiped. Progress can be wiped. When we get to 1.0, that's when the wipes should stop. And that's where gameplay becomes more meaningful, because there's no going back. There's no hard reset. What you have is what you've got, and you got to push forward to progress. That's where progression actually means something. But when your progression can be wiped at any point outside of the game environment for non-gameplay reasons, progression shouldn't mean much. That's why I've always focused on skill development. No, I did not play Freelancer. I didn't know about it until I started back in Star Citizen, and when I heard about it, I'm like, oh yeah, wow, that's great. I would have loved to have played that when it came out, but I have a really hard time playing old games. Yeah, Hobo, it's been like that for ages though. Like, you can make more credits solo. I know that, but I don't care about making credits, right? Ironic coming from a pirate. Don't care about the credits. I care about the gameplay experience, because CIG can't wipe our experiences. Doesn't matter if they wipe all our credits, doesn't matter if they take away all of our components, all of our ships. The experiences that we have carry across between patches can't be wiped. So that's why I'm always focused on the experience of what we're doing as opposed to the credits, which is why I get frustrated when CIG hasn't implemented all their gameplay mechanics that make it and encourage it so that players play the game properly. Apparently this is bullying. Repair and refueling was supposed to be major mechanics. Refueling's broken. Part of the problem with the refueling though, and it being barely functional, they put stations everywhere where you can replenish. Like, you can replenish your fuel, you can repair your ship, but they kind of needed to, because one, we don't have the repairing ships, we've just got the handheld repairing stuff, which is just the opposite of salvaging. It's, instead of sucking up grey goo, we're shooting grey goo at ships, applying HP to it. And refueling's broken at the moment. I believe CIG's fixed it for the next patch, so the 0.2 patch. And refueling being clunky and impractical, like, how else are you expecting it to be? Like, this person wants immersive. Well, guess what? Refueling a fucking spaceship is going to be clunky and impractical. No, not impractical, difficult, unless you practice it, in which case it gets easier to do. But once again, and there's a saying, you've all heard me say it before, planned for, but not yet implemented. It's coming. Base building. A huge promised feature is still just a vague idea floating around in the distant future, but despite being something that could fundamentally change the game. No, it's not. We got to see a ton about it at Star Citizen, or a Citizen Con. Like, did anybody link the Citizen Con videos here? I haven't seen a single video being linked. Oh, wait, what was that? Okay, not the type of video I wanted. This image. Yeah, I feel like somebody needs to link the Citizen Con videos for this person to watch and just be like, base building, here you go, this answers everything you need to know. But like, FPS gameplay being the core part of Star Citizen, like, it's a first-person universe. That's what CIG sells Star Citizen as now, first-person universe, right? And it baffles me that CIG can draw a line in the sand with a 1.0 showcase showing everything that they are prioritizing for a first release product, and you still have people like this OP. Yeah, Spikeness. I honestly feel like even if you showed them CitizenCon, they would just say CIG is lying for money and complain it doesn't exist until it's in game. Yeah, exactly. Like, this person just, they want to have a Suki Lala. That's what they want to do. Farming Spectrum Karma. That's what they're doing. Farming Spectrum Karma. Like, if CIG was that focused on FPS gameplay from, you know, a marketing perspective, they would be selling more FPS shit, a lot more. But they don't. They're just selling spaceships, because that is the core part of the game. The ships are the tools that we use to be able to achieve different tasks. They complain about master modes. It's like, dude, just, they're not reverting it. They're going to iterate. People are just going to have to learn to adapt. I'm a fan of master modes because it does slow down gameplay. It slows down the fights. I fucking hated those idiotic high-speed fights. Hated them so much. Thought they were dumb. As soon as, like, I started seeing people trying to, you know, do these high-speed jousting shit, or trying to, you know, fly at warp factor fucking 9 backwards and try and bait me into following them, but instantly switch off from the fight. This person saying, oh, you know, like, combat was better when we could move faster. Like, no, it doesn't. And we still get jousting in the current flight model. It didn't eliminate it. Dogfighting and high-speed engagements aren't being nerfed, and it has nothing to do with ground troops. Like, this is an idiotic take. Now, this raises an even bigger question. Why is spaceflight one of the core pillars of the game being diluted to accommodate a secondary gameplay loop? No, it is not. CIG identified a problem with the flight model, the previous one, and they went, this is not what we want happening. We want people to actually fight, as opposed to go in, as soon as they lose their shields, tricord the fuck out of dodge, wait until they get their shields back, and then tricord back in. They want people fighting each other at 1,000 meters a second. They didn't dilute it. The problem with a lot of people with this new flight model is they're not taking the time to actually give it a proper go. They just sit there and go, it's not like the old one. I'm so used to the old one. I want the old one. I don't want to have to change. I don't want to have to adapt. Too bad. Why dogfighting and high-speed engagement being nerfed so that ground troops have an easier time? They're not. Ground troops have nothing to do with dogfighting or high-speed engagements. I don't understand this questionable line of thought at all. This person's just grasping at straws. And yeah, CIG does believe in its own vision. They showcased it at fucking Citizen and con. Yeah, there was one point that I wanted to talk about. Where was it? There was another point. Where the hell did they mention the planet ship? Oh, here we go. Originally, we were promised over 100 star systems to explore with a vast interconnected universe full of opportunities for trade, industry, piracy, and deep space adventures. Yeah, that was before the planetary tech that they developed. That was when they planned on just having hero locations on planets. That you would do a pre-rendered or a pre-planned landing sequence at a couple of hero locations on some of the planets in some of the systems, and the rest of the time you would be in your spaceship flying between them, doing missions or other random stuff. Like as Execute pointed out, Freelancer. Pretty much, if you look at Freelancer, that was kind of the direction that they were going. And then they got their planetary tech, 64-bit precision, where they're able to make with like a 16 sextillion kilometers squared gameplay space. That wasn't the original plan. They weren't going to do that. The plan for the planets was that we weren't going to be able to land wherever the hell we want. It wasn't going to be that we're going to be able to, circumnavigate any of the planets from the ground. It wasn't planned that there was going to be heaps of different locations on these planets and moons and all that. The gameplay space that we've got now with both Stanton and Pyro is massive. The infrastructure still needs to be upgraded to support more numbers, but it is fucking massive. This whole idea that we'll be lucky if we see 5 systems. 5 systems is going to be heaps. It already takes close to 15 minutes to get out of Pyro to go to Stanton. That's the traveling. They keep complaining about, oh, they're not delivering what they promised. Dude, they're delivering more. A commitment to deep, engaging spaceflight mechanics. We have never had deep and engaging spaceflight mechanics in Star Citizen. Not once. None of the flight models have been deep and engaging. That's because of the IFCS system taking away a lot of the thought that we need to actually utilize to be able to control our ships. Serious progress on the non-combat professions that were supposed to be the backbone of the economy. What economy, and how could the non-combat professions not achieve contributing to an economy? Functioning trade and cargo system that makes hauling and industry actually matter. The fuck? Cargo hauling is just moving a box from one place to another, and that's already functional. If you want to make hauling matter, then we need something, a reason to haul. We have cargo hauling missions, so you can make credits that way. If you're looking at it from the emergent gameplay experience perspective, then we need something like base building or some sort of manufacturing that we can do where we can contribute commodities to that. But that's a different system requiring interaction with commodities. And cargo hauling is just the movement of boxes from one place to another. Trade comes from, the plans for what they had for, what was it, Star Economy or whatever the fuck they're calling it this week. Planned for but not yet implemented. What we've got now works for what we're doing, which is just making numbers go big, right? Alright, Soren's posted or highlighted a message. So he says, so I don't get it. What is this all crybaby shit about Murder Hobo? Obviously, if you go to Grimhex, you're going to get shot down or killed because it's a criminal station, for fuck's sakes. If the bounty PvP was working, they will not cry about it because PvP players can find their content. Hit the contracted missions, add 0 risk trading, and they have Vaughn pirating PvE. Yeah, I know. We just pirate the players that are doing the Vaughn missions, wait until they load up the cargo, then quickly pounce them. I don't like it because it reminds me too much of hunting rock miners, where we're just watching somebody else do the game, for up to an hour, and then we come in at the last minute and just smash them. Salvage, repair, and refueling that are more than just half-baked gimmicks. Planned for but not yet implemented. CIG needs to remember, return to the old vision of Star Citizen as an immersive universe, not just an FPS for ships. There are just as many base-based missions as there are FPS missions. Like, this person's post is just saying, give us the things that we want, the things that you told us that you're going to give us, but give it to us now. Without understanding, like, CIG is working on a lot of this stuff in the background. They've got teams working on some of this already, and it takes time to build that shit out. Not like they can go, yeah, all right, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to build out server meshing. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, there we go, server meshing. CIG could do that, and then when it all goes to shit and doesn't work, everybody will be fucking wigging out about that and going, well, why isn't it working? What do you mean? You guys said it was done. You did it in 2 weeks. Like, no, mate, that's not how this works. It's not how it works at all. The shit takes time, and they don't get it right the first time sometimes, and then they have to iterate on that and fix it up. Yeah, I'm going to come back over across here now because I don't even want to go through the comments. Where is the game that we backed? It's fucking here. Your eyes are painted on, mate. That's what it is. Your eyes are painted on and you can't articulate yourself well at all enough to be able to tell us what you're actually wanting. Because using buzzwords like fucking immersive and progression and meaningful, things like that, don't mean anything when you actually don't articulate what you mean by that, right? If you're going to say, hey, where's this thing? You should do what Jag did before. I don't get people complaining about PvP as a mostly PvE player. PvP is what makes the game fun. Fly your ship like you're driving through the hood. Lock your doors, windows up, head on a swivel, run if the looky-loo spot you. Yeah, that's the thing is like, some of these anti-PvP militant Care Bears, I don't know if you know this, mixed snake face, but they're literally getting grief from the moment that they get out of their bed in their hab, purely by all these griefers getting around. And they have to fight through all the griefers from the time the door opens on their hab to when they get onto their ship and then taking off and get to their mission site, and the griefer shows up and blows up their ship after they leave it. But some players don't want to play Star Citizen like that. They just want to be able to thumb and bum, mind in neutral, and just play the game like they're fucking, a mindless drone drooling on their keyboard, pressing keys, and feeling a sense of progression in a game at a point in time where progression doesn't mean much. But yeah, All Mate's eyes are painted on. They created a vision of what they thought Star Citizen was going to be in their mind, which didn't align with what Chris Roberts was doing, and they're clutching at these straws where they're trying to blame everything else for not being the way that they want it to be, that they're trying to shape the game to be the way that they want it to be. Star Citizen is immersive. The flight model is good enough for what we got. COG plans on iterating on it. A lot of the problems that they've got are planned for, but not yet implemented with their solutions. It's coming, just not coming at the pace that you want it to be at. This all just falls back to planned for, but not yet implemented. Be patient, your game is coming, and you're going to get it whether you like it or not. And to sit there and keep saying it's been dumbed down to just being focused on FPS Call of Duty bullshit is exactly that, bullshit. This game is way more immersive than what was originally planned. It's just not going in the direction that you want it to, and that upsets you. And it also upsets 459 other players who just turn out to be wrong.